Neha Sharma, a devoted wife on the outside, and Arjun Malhotra, her cousin's charming husband, hid a dark secret. What began as a forbidden affair behind closed doors soon spiraled into lies, betrayal, and a cold-blooded murder that shocked an entire community. Neha Sharma lived in a small but comfortable apartment in Delhi with her husband Rajesh. From the outside, their marriage appeared stable and ordinary. Neha was a devoted wife, Rajesh a hardworking man who spent long hours at the office. Neighbors described them as quiet and respectful, the kind of couple who never caused trouble. Yet behind the closed doors of their home, Neha felt a growing emptiness. The routines of her life, cooking, cleaning, attending family events, and waiting for her husband to return each evening, made her feel suffocated. She longed for something more, a spark that could make her feel alive again. The turning point came during a family wedding. As relatives gathered for the celebrations, Neha was reintroduced to her cousin's husband, Arjun Malhotra. She had met him years before but had paid little attention at the time. Now, seeing him again, she noticed everything about him: his confidence, his charm, and the way he carried himself. Arjun was different from Rajesh, who was gentle but reserved. He spoke with authority, laughed easily, and seemed to notice Neha in a way her own husband no longer did. Their conversations at the wedding were casual, yet each word lingered in Neha's mind long after the event was over. What started as polite exchanges soon grew into late-night phone calls and friendly messages. Neha would wait for Rajesh to fall asleep before sneaking into the living room to talk to Arjun for hours. The thrill of secrecy gave her a rush she hadn't felt in years. Arjun, too, seemed drawn to her in ways he couldn't explain. He began to confide in her about his frustrations with his own marriage, and Neha listened with sympathy that quickly turned into emotional attachment. The two started meeting outside the family circle, careful to choose places where no one would recognize them. They would sit together in cafes, pretending to be business acquaintances, but beneath the surface, their bond deepened with every encounter. Neha knew what she was doing was dangerous, not just for her marriage but also for her family's honor. Yet the excitement overpowered her guilt. For the first time in years, she felt seen, desired, and alive. As weeks turned into months, their connection shifted from emotional comfort to physical intimacy. Each meeting pushed them further into dangerous territory, but neither could resist. Neha was convinced she had finally found what was missing in her life, unaware that this secret connection would soon unravel into a nightmare of betrayal, destruction, and death. Neha and Arjun's secret relationship grew stronger with each passing day, and what began as occasional stolen moments quickly turned into a dangerous obsession. The excitement of sneaking around gave them both a sense of freedom they had never experienced before. They booked hotel rooms under false names, exchanged expensive gifts, and created elaborate stories to explain their absences from home. Every meeting carried the thrill of risk, and that only made their passion stronger. Neha, once a quiet housewife, now lived in constant anticipation of the next encounter. Arjun, equally reckless, seemed unconcerned about the danger of being discovered, but the walls around their secret life began to show cracks. Rajesh started to sense changes in Neha's behavior. She became distracted at home, often lost in thought, sometimes smiling at her phone in ways she could not explain. She made excuses to leave the house more frequently, claiming visits to friends or errands that lasted far longer than necessary. Rajesh noticed the distance growing between them, and his suspicion deepened. He quietly began keeping track of her movements, waiting for the moment when the truth would reveal itself. Meanwhile, Arjun's wife, Priya, also grew uneasy. She was no stranger to her husband's flirtatious nature, but this time she sensed something different. He guarded his phone with unusual care, erasing call logs and locking messages. Late nights became frequent, and his excuses of work or business meetings sounded hollow. Priya's instincts told her something was wrong, and she began quietly watching him, hoping to find answers. Despite the growing tension around them, Neha and Arjun continued their affair with reckless determination. The secrecy made it intoxicating, and both were blinded by their emotions. They told themselves that no one truly knew, that their lies were strong enough to protect them, but the truth was already circling closer, threatening to break apart the fragile world they had created. The first real scare came when Priya discovered a hotel receipt tucked into Arjun's wallet. The name on it was false, but the date matched a day when he had claimed to be traveling for work. Around the same time, Rajesh found inconsistencies in Neha's stories about her outings. He began to confront her gently, though without proof she always dismissed his concerns. Still, the doubt lingered in his mind, fueling his determination to uncover the truth. Neha and Arjun knew they were being watched more closely than before, yet neither could bring themselves to end the affair. The thrill of forbidden love was too powerful, and their secret meetings continued. But what they failed to realize was that the danger was no longer just about exposure. It was pushing them toward decisions that would lead to an irreversible tragedy. As the walls began to close in, Neha and Arjun's once thrilling affair turned into a source of fear and paranoia. The constant risk of being discovered weighed heavily on them both. Neha worried that Rajesh's suspicious questions were more than casual curiosity, and she feared he might one day catch her in the act. Arjun faced similar pressure at home as Priya grew increasingly alert to his unusual behavior. What had once felt like an escape now felt like a trap, and the two lovers began to imagine ways to break free from the people who stood in their way. Their conversations, once filled with passion and excitement, shifted into darker territory. Neha complained about Rajesh's growing suspicions, saying he watched her every move and questioned even the smallest things. Arjun echoed her frustration, describing how Priya's constant watchfulness made it harder for him to cover his tracks. They both felt cornered, convinced that discovery was inevitable. Instead of ending the relationship, they started to consider something far more sinister. They believed that the only way to secure their future together was to remove the obstacles permanently. At first, it was only whispers of fantasy, thoughts neither dared to fully say aloud. But as the days passed, the idea took shape. Neha began pressing the point, insisting that Rajesh's sharp eyes and relentless suspicion would eventually expose them. Arjun, equally desperate to keep their secret alive, agreed that drastic measures were needed. Slowly, the unthinkable plan formed in their minds. Rajesh would have to die, and it would need to look like an accident or a random crime. They began to plan in chilling detail. Arjun, who had more resources, suggested staging the murder as a robbery gone wrong. Neha provided information about Rajesh's routines, the times he left work, the routes he usually took, and the places he often parked his car. Every detail was discussed and refined until the plan seemed airtight. The thought of carrying it out filled Neha with both dread and anticipation. She told herself that once Rajesh was gone, she would finally be free, able to live openly with Arjun. One fateful evening, Rajesh left the house for what seemed like a normal drive. Hours later, his lifeless body was discovered inside his car, parked on a deserted roadside. The scene had been staged to appear as a violent robbery, his belongings scattered and his phone missing. On the surface, it looked convincing, and the police initially treated it as another tragic but random crime. Neha and Arjun believed their plan had worked, but beneath the surface, small details were waiting to be uncovered, details that would soon unravel their dark secret. The discovery of Rajesh's body sent shockwaves through his family and community. At first, the police leaned toward the idea of a robbery gone wrong, but something about the scene didn't feel right. The car had been neatly parked, not abandoned in haste. While his wallet and phone were missing, his wedding ring and other valuables were still on him, raising doubts about the motive. Detectives began to dig deeper, determined to uncover the truth behind the murder. Neha played the part of the grieving widow with convincing sorrow. She cried in front of relatives, accepted their sympathy, and maintained her innocence during initial questioning. But beneath the surface, she was restless, watching closely to see if the police would stumble upon anything that connected her to the crime. Arjun, too, behaved cautiously, comforting Priya and trying to present himself as a devoted husband. Yet, Both of them underestimated how quickly suspicions could turn against them. The investigation gained momentum when detectives reviewed phone records. They discovered an unusual pattern of late-night calls and frequent communication between Neha and Arjun, far more than what would be expected between relatives by marriage. This raised red flags, and investigators began to consider whether their relationship went beyond family ties. Digging further, they examined CCTV footage from the area near the crime scene. To their surprise, a car resembling Arjun's was caught on camera, not far from where Rajesh was found on the night of the murder. As police tightened their focus, Priya stepped forward with her own suspicions. She revealed to investigators that she had long doubted her husband's fidelity. She handed over hotel receipts she had found, along with screenshots of messages that hinted at an affair. Priya's testimony gave the detectives exactly what they needed: proof that the relationship between Neha and Arjun was not only inappropriate but potentially tied to the murder itself. When confronted with this evidence, both lovers began to crack under pressure. Neha insisted she had nothing to do with the death of her husband and suggested Arjun had manipulated her. Arjun, in turn, accused Neha of pushing him into the plan, portraying himself as the unwilling participant. Their carefully crafted lies fell apart as investigators compared their statements and uncovered contradictions. Piece by piece, the truth came together. The police realized the murder had been planned, not random. The affair, the secrecy, and the motive of freedom all pointed directly to Neha and Arjun. The facade of grief and denial could no longer hide the reality of their crime. The trial that followed gripped the community, drawing attention from both local media and shocked relatives who struggled to understand how a secret affair had spiraled into murder. Neha entered the courtroom with the image of a sorrowful widow, dressed in plain clothing and avoiding eye contact with those who once trusted her. Arjun, once respected as a confident and charming man, appeared deflated, his confident demeanor gone. Both faced charges of conspiracy and murder, and every detail of their betrayal was laid bare for the world to see. The prosecution presented a strong case, piecing together phone records, CCTV footage, and the damning testimony of Priya. Jurors listened as investigators explained how the staged robbery had failed to match the evidence. Rajesh's valuables, left untouched, contradicted the idea of a random attack. More importantly, the timeline of calls between Neha and Arjun placed them in constant contact around the time of the killing. Each revelation painted a clearer picture of the lovers' desperation and greed, leaving little room for doubt. As the evidence unfolded, Neha and Arjun attempted to shift blame onto each other. Neha's lawyers argued that she had been manipulated by Arjun, a man who preyed on her loneliness and convinced her to go along with his violent scheme. Arjun's defense countered that it was Neha who had pushed for the murder, claiming she was motivated by her frustration with Rajesh and her desire for a new life. The court watched as the two once inseparable lovers turned into bitter enemies, each trying to save themselves at the other's expense. Despite their attempts, the weight of proof was overwhelming. After weeks of testimony and careful deliberation, the jury reached its decision. Neha and Arjun were both found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The announcement sent ripples through the courtroom, with gasps of disbelief from family members who had once celebrated weddings and festivals with them. For Priya, the verdict was bittersweet. Her marriage had been destroyed, but the truth had finally come to light. The story became a grim reminder of how forbidden desires, when left unchecked, can lead to devastating consequences. Neha lost her husband, her freedom, and the respect of her family. Arjun lost his marriage, his reputation, and his future. What began as a secret romance built on stolen moments ended in tragedy for everyone involved. Their downfall was a chilling testament to how lies and betrayal, once set in motion, can consume everything in their path and leave nothing but ruin behind.